Welcome to Agriculture Engineering Strategy Pattern of IFoS Reflections.
My name is Nikhil Joshi, and I have appeared for 3 UPSC interviews till now. Last year, I have scored 735 in IFoS Mains 24, and I have increased my agriculture engineering score from 147 to 236. So hereby, I would like to discuss about the orientation of the subject, approach and strategy that one must follow while actually approaching the subject, handling the subject, and on the path of scoring very high marks. And I would like to specifically emphasize on what mistakes that I did and what you should not do. So you can have this as a benchmark, as a gap analysis tool, so that you actually work for it and excel in the two optional papers which we have. I will give you a brief about what to do and how to actually tackle this subject, considering the fact that it's an engineering subject, not the, like many of the people who are first timers confuse it with agriculture, but actually it is not. It is engineering. So I always tell people that this is engineering, not agriculture. So if you have gone through the syllabus, you must be knowing that it's a different subject, different orientation, different outlook, but comparatively doable and high scoring compared to the other options which are there. Like I myself have been a student of geology in the past, but I have also shifted to agriculture engineering, considering there is limited ratification which is needed compared to what we have in geology, and also the conceptual understanding actually enhances your score compared to other optionals. So I will give you a brief idea about what the syllabus is, how to approach, what should be the strategy, and what mistakes did I make, considering the background that I had actually scored 147 in my first attempt, including both the papers. I mean, in one of the papers, I scored as low as 56 marks. And I increased that score to 236 in the next attempt with just by a strategic orientation, by understanding what the paper demands, and by understanding what should be the overall strategy while handling the subject. What I realized that there is very limited guidance and orientation sessions which are available for this subject. Majorly, there are only few notes available, but the notes are very scattered. They do not give you an idea about why, how, and where to prepare about this subject. And considering it being a technical subject, we do need to have a specific focus on the technicalities, the numericals, as well as what kind of formula and the scientific concepts which are behind them. And they aren't like very extraordinary or out of the matter subjects, but very basic, based on what the phenomenon which actually study in the 12th physics, or let's say some of the engineering subjects that we study in the graduation. So moving on to the actually session. So like I have said, it is an engineering subject which focuses on technical, numerical, and applied aspects. I have talked about the syllabus, whereby there are 4 major topics. In section 1A, we have soil water conservation. In section B of first paper, we have irrigation engineering. In section A of paper 2, we have farm power, and in section B of paper 2, we have agri processing. Compared to major, I won't call the other rest of the 4 as a minor topics, but I call them as a short topics because they are not minor. They actually help you in concealing your weaknesses, your limited preparation in the major topics, and you will end up in writing more from these topics. They are comparatively easy, comparatively shorter. They take comparatively shorter time to cover, and also limited difficult questions are asked from it. Like the questions from the agri structures, the agri energy, the GIS and remote sensing are majorly theory oriented, generalistic, and can be written even if a bouncer questions come. But the similar question from the irrigation or the agri processing, which is difficult, which is bouncer, will be difficult to handle. So good understanding, good coverage of these short topics would ensure that they act as a savior for you. And after that, I discussed how the agriculture engineering syllabus is not only can be differentiated from these 3 topics, but can also be differentiated from the discipline from which they actually got inspired. So like the soil water conservation, the hydrology aspect, the structural aspect were inspired from the civil engineering background. Similarly, farm power machinery, agro processing, the agri energy derives its inspiration from the mechanical engineering, and the instrumentation and some of the topics here and there of the actuators and the other electronics comes from the instrumentation and the computer applications. I was saying that this syllabus is actually vast, and because it is an engineering subject which requires 4 years of study. And while we are covering the same thing in these 70-75 years, or let's say for the 40-45 days, which was the timeline in the earlier years, we need a strategy whereby we are actually prioritizing the topic and we are selecting the topics which have very high possibility of appearing in the exam. And to do that, you need differential approach, differential strategy, and skewed approach to ensure that, you give attention to the 20% topics from which 80% of the paper comes. And to have that strategy, to have that approach, I talked about how you should address the 4 major topics which were there. Based on syllabus, I asked you to find your strong area. Like if you have background in the mechanical, in the production, or let's say in the automobile or in the energy systems engineering, your strong area would be closer to the mechanical aspects. Find that area, start with that area, cover that area extensively. And while covering that area extensively, there also you can have differential approach. Segregate the PYQs of last 4-5 years topic wise, and only prepare concepts and those PYQs first. I would call them as a doing bare minimum. It will act for you as a minimum common program, which we actually study in the Indian National Congress. So this minimum common program would ensure that you will have a background, you will have something to prepare for, something to appear for, something to write for in the exam. In the case of exigency, like say many of you actually come from after writing civil services, this will be the first time you will be hearing of the subject, thinking of the subject, talking of the subject. In those cases, if you have like something minimum, something basic to actually write into, and focus on the other areas of GK, English and forestry, and have this as something just to push your score well, then you can actually, trust me, you can not only get an interview call, but also a final selection. So, and what happens is that from my experience and from my observation, most of the people don't even do these bare minimum things. So even if like you are doing bare minimum things, you are already ahead of the crowds. And then after doing this bare minimum, after segregating the topics, after covering the PYQs, move to the topics which surround them. So let's say if there is a question on, if you have gone through, if let's say there is a question on rational formula, then question appeared on the rational formula, then you can actually cover the Cook's formula, which actually surrounds it and which is next to it. So you can cover these topics only and only after you have excelled and you have covered this. That will ensure that you have something covered, something tangible in your hand. And even in those, prioritize theory questions first. And here, majorly theory questions revolve around what is the types, what are the functioning, what are the features of a phenomenon. Let's say they generally ask about traction theory. They ask about differences between petrol engine and diesel engine, 2-stroke engine versus 4-stroke engine, or let's say what is watershed. So such questions are very easier for you. Or let's say the formation of gullies. What stages are there in formation of gullies? These questions do not require a deep understanding, deep study, but just a cursory reading, a revision would ensure that you can handle those questions very well. So even with shorter time, even with shorter analysis, even with shorter approach, you are actually prioritizing and you are ensuring that you cover good portion of the syllabus. And then after covering the theory, after covering the types, the stages, aspects, move on to numericals. And here also cover PYQ first. So if let's say there is a question on contour bunding, the design of contour bunding. So just why not cover how that question was solved? Only see how that question is being solved, understand the process, learn the formulae, and then go into solving numerous similar type of questions. Again, strategy is cover minimum basic first and then move to extensively to ensure that we are already ahead of the crowd. And now, if let's say you come from civil background and you are not comfortable with mechanical, or you come from mechanical background or you are not comfortable with one of them, in this case, you need to prepare that part at least which has high probability to appear. And even in those areas, focus on the theory aspects. To give you an example, for me, irrigation engineering has always been a challenge. So rather than covering the hydrology of waves or the recuperation test and rest of the other topics, I tried to cover pumps very extensively. I saw the pattern that every year, somewhere or the other, there will be question on pumps, and I'm not going to miss out on them. Of course, that benefited me, and that ensured that my question choice does not get compromised by completely leaving the topic which I'm not comfortable in. Similarly, in agri processing, there will be numerous processes. In that case, I have observed that the pasteurization, the sterilization of milk actually appears very frequently in the paper. So I ensured that I am ready with these high probability topics, high PYQ based topics, to actually expand my coverage, to expand my syllabus, and increase the chances of me attempting more questions from more marks. While doing all of it, there will be certain areas which are purely theory based, which do not require deep understanding, deep numerical analysis, or deep concepts. Let's say the tillage aspect of soil water conservation, the packaging of agri processing, the water resources in irrigation, and the soil water conservation. These topics are very generalized, very GS oriented, and you will understand that they are not very scientific. They do not require very extensive thing, but you just should know that this topic comes from it, and so you will be able to write something surrounding it. So this part you should not miss on, neither in the area which you are comfortable in, and even in the area which you are not comfortable. Like I said, in the irrigation, you can always write questions on how, why are canals important, why is irrigation important, how to manage water resources, and rest of the other generalized questions. Similarly, in the tillage aspect, you can always talk about what is erosion, what are different regions of erosion in India, etc., etc. I hope I am able to convey what I'm trying to say here. Despite having that, you should understand that there are few areas which are actually difficult. I mean, even for those who study the agriculture engineering for 4 years, have graduation from it, they are difficult for them as well. Let's say there is a spillway design, whereby in the soil water conservation, where they ask you about hydraulic design, the structural design. It is lengthy, it is difficult, and it requires by hearting of formulas as well. So even in shorter time, getting familiar, getting expert, and getting analytical in such type of question becomes difficult. Similarly, hydrology of wells is there, and then there are number of unit operations which are there in the agri processing. In farm power as well, there are questions around the equipments which have like multiple of the equipments are there, and you cannot, like, it will be difficult for you to prepare all of them in detail. So in such cases, what I would say, keep them to the last, and even after having them to last, know the general principle of it. Let's say if there is a design, and if they ask you a general question on how to design it, so at least you should know, like, these 3 steps are there. They do first calculate runoff, then they, based on runoff, they do the hydraulic design, and based on it they do structural design, and then they do the failure mechanisms. So if you have known the syllabus, and if, let's say, there is a gun to your gunpoint that you must attempt the question, only attempt those questions, and even in that case, do not hesitate from writing away the general principles. I know, I mean, I may sound a bit immature here, but my intention is to maximization of your marks in the minimum amount of time, and considering the fact that none of us are agricultural graduates, agriculture engineering graduates, but still we require understanding, we require to attempt the paper of it, and we need to excel it. This is a way of clearing the exams, getting the maximum marks, and I'm not here to make you an agriculture engineering graduate. So for that, I will suggest you to, by hook or crook, by ensure that you have such relevant content, you have such relevant understanding, and this can be actually prepared, this can be done by just going through 4-5 years of PYQs, not more than that, but only 4-5 years of PYQs are actually reflected one way or the other. And even if you do not understand, do not write the direct question, the direct answer for it, at least write, you can be able to write something around it, and that something would actually fetch you marks, and you can trust me on it. For the shorter topics, again, not the minor topics, but for the shorter topics, all the topics are majorly theory based, and in that itself there are 5-6 themes in each topic. So in agriculture, let's say example of agriculture structures, so they will ask you about the milch barns, they will ask you about the poultries, the greenhouses, and the traditional structures. Only 4 or 5 such topics are there, and each topics have 2 or 3 different subtopics. So in 15-16 topics, you will cover the entire aspect, and in paper it actually comes for 50 marks out of the 200. This makes these shorter topics very high rewarding topics and have very high reward ratio. So you must complete them at priority to ensure that you have a comfort with subject and you do not like end up on having a very underconfident approach across the preparation cycle, as most of the candidates do generally come to me and ask that, is it possible to cover it in 40 days? It is possible to cover it in 6 days. I say the agriculture engineering graduate, you won't be able to be an agriculture engineering graduate in 40 days, but you can definitely be prepared. You can actually be comfortable with the syllabus and at least the paper whereby you can score marks. So my overall approach for it would be, depending upon your strength, cover the either start with the soil water conservation or the farm power first, then cover the 4 small topics and then move to rest of 3. Here itself, you can cover the area which you are least comfortable with to the last. Let's say in my case, irrigation engineering I was not very comfortable with. So I used to keep it to the last and generally did the minimum theory based for it to ensure that I'm not missing out on the 10 markers. And for the optional paper, for the optional questions, I would be more than comfortable with the agri-structure aspects. I wish to like highlight and point out what mistakes I did. Like it's not a fact, it's not a concern that I did not study when I scored 147, and it's not a fact that I did not study way too much when I scored 236. But the only difference was how did I approach the paper, how I tried to complete the syllabus, and my orientation towards the entire subject mattered the most. Firstly, when I scored 147, I give very limited attention to the 2 small topics of instrumentation and the agro energy. That actually costed me around 60-70 marks in the paper 2, where I could not even attempt the questions. So that actually reduced my attempt from 190, which was in last year, to the 120 in the year before that, whereby I scored very little marks. When I scored 236, I was very comfortable with those small 4 topics, and even in that, I wrote 140 marker entirely from the GIS and aerial photography, and 140 marker from the structures. So these 15 topics preparation actually yielded me a very high effort to reward ratio. Similarly, like one of the mistake I made was too much focus on the difficult topics. Like I was studying books, I was watching videos for the understanding of the difficult topics, which I have like given example in the previous discussion. In previous year, when I scored 236, I focused mainly on easy theory topics first. I ensured that I would be covering those topics in the entirety and I wouldn't be missing on them. And if the questions comes from those topics, I would make sure that I'm writing one of the best answers. These topics are across the paper, they are almost 60 such topics. And if we cover those 60 topics, you are like set, you are good to go. You can use them at many of the places. Third mistake I did was, in this attempt, I was too much dependent on the notes. Like, yes, I mean, there is a dearth of content, dearth of resources for this optional. And then there are very popular notes as well from the toppers, but I was too much dependent on them. Those notes are very good, but they cannot be your one-stop solution because they are very dispersed in nature. Secondly, they do not differentiate across the topic. Like I have told, few of the topics are difficult, few of the topics are easy. You need to have that differentiation to ensure that you are covering the easier topics first and difficult topics the next. And thirdly, they are disorganized. To give you an example, the hydrology is covered in 2 papers, in 2 sections of the irrigation and the soil water conservation. However, to save your effort, you need to cover that in the one part itself, in the one go itself. In addition to that, I try to watch short videos, not an entire course, but rather wherever I felt there's a need for me to have an understanding. Let's say there's a topic on designing of bunds, terraces, and contours. There is an excellent NPTEL course for it. So there are 30-35 minutes videos, and in 5-6 videos, it will cover all the design aspects. So in 3 hours of video lectures, I covered a major section of it, a major chunk of it, and I got to know about it only because I had like made the mistake of not covering them and focusing too much on the hard topics in the previous attempt. Similarly, there are various institutions which provide videos for the gate, which are freely available on YouTube. Similarly, certain mechanisms, like let's say around the how the clutch works, how the gear works, how the engine stroke works. If someone is new to this, then they can watch videos of it, 2-minute videos, 3 minutes videos of it on YouTube, and understanding what mechanisms generally grow in there. So that this selective and differential focus actually helped me very, very much. And most importantly, what made the biggest difference was I knew the outlook of the exam. Like I have told, I have realized that if people take 4 years to cover this agriculture engineering, what should I do to cover that in 40 days? So I realized that I shouldn't be an agriculture engineering graduate. Rather, I need to be equipped with only such knowledge whereby I can score marks. So my outlook changed, my orientation changed, and my focus got shifted to scoring the maximum marks, attempting the maximum papers, and covering only those topics from which there's a high probability of questions coming in the exam. So focus on easy areas, doable areas was the differentiating factors. Secondly, I focused too much on the PYQs. In PYQs, I tried to have solutions for them, my self solutions. These solutions ensure that I actually have a certain topic covered in itself, and if it appears in the exam, I will be good to go. So like in 2025, there was question about the area of pond, volume of pond and contour lines. So that question appeared in, I think, in 2021. So that exact question got repeated. So rather than studying too much about the ponds and rest of the things, I got to know that only this question has probability of coming in exam. I only prepared it. I prepared the two formulas, the trapezoidal and the Simpson formula, and then I got rewarded for it. Then another next very central thing is I utilize that 3-day gap. I have realized that people get disheartened by the tremendous vast outlook of the syllabus, and they do not end up in revising nothing between the GK paper and the optional paper. That 3-day gap is very important, very, very important, considering there are various formulas, there are various short diagrams. These diagrams, these formulas are very crucial for the value added and enriched answer, and you can only reproduce them if you have revised them in those 3-day gap. And this revision actually was the game changer for me, because in the previous attempt, I felt that covering such syllabus in short time was not possible, but as an extension of doing easy and doable areas first, I could cover those only shorter areas in that 3-day gap, and that actually rewarded me very handsomely. And when I know which areas are easy, which areas are doable, I prepared a short diagram and formula sheet for them, and I try to force them whenever possible. So let's say, I mean, there is an example of, let's say, the question there was on the erosion of the Western India. I tried to incorporate the, like, how rational formula is there, how it would lead to how the universal soil loss equation actually can be utilized in handling and the losses that arise from the erosion in those areas. I mean, I know it is a bit tangential and it does look a bit forced, but I needed to score marks, I needed to sound a bit smart, and I need to make the answers technical. How can I make these answers technical? By incorporating the diagrams, formulae, and the vocabulary of the subject matter which actually exist. And while answering questions, I have realized that there is an engineering outlook which is required. I tried to use the concepts and theories in the questions. Like I have given the example of the erosion. I try to use soil loss equation. I try to have structural aspects more in the questions. Similarly, in the irrigation questions, I try to use water use efficiency terms. I try to use pumps as a way of deciphering things. Similarly, my approach was problem solution based approach. As engineering as a field is there to solve certain problems in a with the help of technology, you also need such outlook while writing the answers as well. And as I have discussed earlier, I wrote formulae at many of the places. I have realized that, let's see, I do not come from the agriculture engineering background. I only studied them for the purpose of writing them in the exams. So I ensured that if I am not writing here, then where would I use them? I would accept this. I don't think there will be any way these formulas would be useful for me. So I ensured that wherever and whenever I get that opportunity, I wrote them. And I felt it actually rewards. Another thing which is important and I would like to discuss is attempt strategy. I have said earlier, like the 4 small topics actually are savior, given the fact that they conceal and they shelter your weaknesses which you have in the major topics. In that case, particularly, let's say I was able to conceal my irrigation mistake, irrigation limited coverage by extensive coverage of agriculture structure. Similarly, my agri processing limited coverage was covered by the computer application and the instrumentation topic. So this small savior and looking for questions from these things ensured that I am having the maximum of the attempt. Similarly, I tried to cover 2 major topics, which is the farm power and the soil water conservation. Here itself, the hydrology aspect. I realized that hydrology aspect not only have very high relevance in the paper 1 section A, but also in paper 1 section B. Similarly, farm power can also be savior not only in the farm power questions, but also in the agri energy questions and also in the agri processing questions. So these topics I have identified as very high yielding cross domain, cross sectional areas, and I try to cover them as much as possible. Third thing is I have realized there is a misconception about attempting numericals as much as possible so that they are rewarding. Yes, I mean, those numericals are rewarding, but the numericals are very challenging. Some of, like in 2022, there were numericals which even the experts couldn't solve them out. I have tried, I have talked with people who actually are professor in the agriculture universities. They themselves at times struggle to have those numericals solved. So either you take a bet or gamble, or rather than play safe and score marks. I decided to play safe and score marks and attempted that question where I knew most of the parts. And even in that, when I was writing the theory, I focused on writing something relevant. I mean, if I would have known I was writing the concept well, but to some of the others whom I have discussed, they tried the same thing. And I just wanted to give you a caution that it may at times backfire. Like, let's say there was a question on Muskingum's coefficient and the flood routing in 2024. So one of my friend with whom I have already discussed the same strategy, he said, Nikhil, I just wrote the flood routing as channeling one flood from one place to the other, the flood management and all. But actually, if you know, flood routing is a hydrological concept whereby there is a continuum and continuity equation, and whereby they actually predict the hydrology of a one place at the downstream from the hydrology of a one place which is upstream. So it is a technical subject. So my intention is, I mean, writing something relevant does not mean that you would end up writing something which is like very wrong, but still it makes sense to give it a shot because you will have nothing to lose. That's it for me. If you have any queries, drop me message at in Telegram at IFoS_reflections. Thank you for being here. You and Jai Hind.